Okay, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. This is the last in a series of 10 online TIM team meetings. This is our Orangeburg area TIM team, and we want to make sure we make these worthwhile and share some good information with you. If you are there and you have any questions, use the chat feature or email network at sctimnetwork.com. To send us any questions as we go through the presentations. That would be great. So next slide, please. You can see three pictures down on the bottom. When we have these TIM team meetings, quite often we will arrange for some different demonstrations, or depending on what's happened in your area. Up in Greenville at one of our TIM team meetings, on the lower left in the picture, you'll see the SHEP guys are in there. We had a wrecker company bring in some vehicles, and then the SHEP guys showed us everything they can do. I mean, push, pull, drag, absolutely fabulous what these guys can do. So they did a really good presentation and demonstration for us. The middle picture was one of our Rock Hill area TIM team meetings, and we've got some great photographic roadway reproductions of roadways, 6-lane interstates, 2-lane rural roads, intersections, whatever we need, and a tackle box full of fire trucks, tow trucks, police cars, ambulances, tractor trailers, whatever we need to simulate in a two-dimensional look, which is far more effective than just looking at pictures on a slide presentation. But we can simulate whatever kind of incident you've recently had, or an incident that you'd just like to discuss. And we've found these tabletops to be very beneficial. We can do that at any time. Lower right picture, that's Howe Springs Fire Department repurposed F-250 with a really neat wrap on it, covering a lot of different topics. Chief, instead of selling it, decided to repurpose it and get it all done up for roadway incidents. Got 100 cones in the back. It's got a message board sign on the top right behind the cab that can flip up. He can program whatever message he wants into that, and it tows a full-size message board sign. That department does not cover any interstate. They're just off I-95. They cover 52 as it goes from Florence down to Lake City. So they do have a lot of 4-lane and 2-lane road. However, they make this truck and all of this equipment available to any agency in the area: Highway Patrol, Sheriff's Department, EMS, other fire departments, anybody who needs it to come out and set up and help make that wreck scene safer. So that's a fantastic tool that Chief Billy Dillon at the Howe Springs Fire Department has made available. And he's a real advocate for traffic incident management, as is evidenced by this package that he's put together. Next slide, please. So who we are, why we're here. Well, we are all the different disciplines that we'll discuss in just a minute, hopefully. And we are trying to get law enforcement, fire, EMS, tow operators, coroner's offices, just a good representation of all of these disciplines. We'd like to get them in here and network and talk about what we're doing out there. If we're doing something wrong, how do we fix it? If we're doing something right, let's keep doing it. So these discussions are very important. And we need all of those disciplines to participate. These meetings really create some good upfront relationships, so that when we get on the scene, we know each other. That's important. Speaking from my years of experience, showing up on a wreck scene and knowing the guys that you're now working with on that wreck scene, understanding who's got what to do and what my duties are, what your duties are, that's absolutely a time saver, and it makes that scene much safer. Today's agenda, I'm going to go through some statistics, statewide and Orangeburg area, in regards to fatalities and what's going on out in the roadways in your area. And then we'll have a presentation, really good presentation on distracted driving by public safety officers. And then after that, DHEC, our Department of Health Environmental Control here in South Carolina, is going to give us some critical information on what they do, what they can do, what they can't do, when you call them, all those things that we need to know prior to activating them at a hazmat spill. So there'll be some really good information coming up very shortly. Next slide. Okay, we are working with several agencies at this time to schedule and reschedule Sharp 2 training classes. We're back, as of June 1st of this year, we are back doing face-to-face classes. This year is winding down, just finished one, I think last Saturday or a week ago Saturday, had 30 people in it, sheriff's deputies and fire personnel. And we have classes already scheduled starting in the month, about halfway through the month of January. So if your agency wishes to have the training or some of your people need this training, please get a hold of me and let's get this training scheduled. We're trying to hit 60% this year. I don't know if we'll make it. We'd like to. Right now, we're sitting at 56.6%. So we're just 0.4% off of 60. But as I said, we're pretty well winding down, so we might not quite reach it. The key parameters, the South Carolina Department of Transportation, who sponsors and supports this program, is minimum 15 participants, and all disciplines must be invited. Doesn't mean they'll all show up, but they must be invited. So, and we will help you with that as well. If we schedule a class at your agency, we will help you to reach out and get other agencies to come in and attend that training. If it's a training session or if it's one of these meetings, you need to register on sctimnetwork.com. Cannot overemphasize that. Nothing worse than traveling for 20 minutes or an hour to go to a meeting or a training class and you show up and they say, oh no, it was canceled. There weren't enough people registered. That's how we let you know if the class is a no-go. That's very important. So we need to know who's registered in order to advise if the session's a go or no-go and make sure that everybody's aware of that. So please make sure you register for any upcoming training or meetings. Go ahead. So train the trainer, or I'm sorry, in-person training and web-based training, you can see the numbers down for South Carolina. Web-based is in brackets. The main difference between the two is the web-based training is a generic Federal Highway Administration class, and law enforcement and fire does not get credit in South Carolina for either of or for that class, for the web-based training class. If you take the face-to-face training within the last couple of years, law enforcement will get 3.5 hours towards their recertification. Fire will get credit, will get a course code and section number. Fire will get credit on their transcript at the academy. And either face-to-face or web-based training, EMS will get 4 hours towards their national registry recertification. So that training is available on the web. It is a generic class, does not outline South Carolina laws and rules and procedure. But in the event that someone needs it and there is not something coming up that they can attend in their area, that is available to them. Next slide, please. Okay, so that should say goal of 60%. You can see 59.3. And as I said, we just got some numbers yesterday, I think, and we're sitting at 59.6 right now. So we may not make 60%, but we're doing pretty well. We're really doing pretty well. When we started really monitoring this a couple of years ago, our goal was 45. Last year it was 50%. We made 50.2. And this year we were going gangbusters until middle of March. Some virus or something kicked in and kind of knocked the wind out of our sails. So unfortunately, that's really slowed us down. But we look forward to ramping back up again in 2021. And you know, 60%, you can say, well, that's pretty good. Well, yes, it is. However, that still means that 40% of our responders have not received the training. And if everybody has received this training and we're all playing off the same sheet of music, it makes for a much safer scene for first responders, for the victims in the crash, and for all the users and the motoring public. So we need to make sure that we're having this. Doesn't matter if it's a rookie police officer, a brand new firefighter, the police chief, fire chief, the sheriff. If there's a possibility of pulling over and assisting at a roadway scene, at a wreck, this training is very, very important. So next slide is going to show us local fatality statistics. Orangeburg County has actually ticked up one. I just got some figures. So Orangeburg County is sitting at 31. You can see Dorchester 21. They're still at 21. Calhoun's at 4. Now your bad counties, your really bad ones where you don't want to necessarily go driving right now. Greenville's actually up 5. They're at 69. Their most recent numbers. Berkeley's at 55. Horry County has dropped to the bottom of the list. Actually, they're at 52. So Charleston County's 52. I'm sorry, Spartanburg's still at 51. They're at the bottom of the list. So, I mean, there's just amazing the numbers here. Last year at this time, we had 801 crashes in this state. This year, 790. So we're down 11 crashes, but we're up 14 fatalities. So 868 fatalities at this time last year. We've had 882 as of the 11th. So that's yesterday. So we're up 14 fatalities. The big thing that amazes me, I just don't understand this, is last year at this time, the number of fatalities with access to seatbelts was 551. Passengers not wearing seatbelts, 261. Still unacceptable. But this year, 599 of the fatalities had access to seatbelts. 323 were not wearing them. That number's going up. That's totally unacceptable. So, I mean, I don't know if it's an enforcement thing that we just don't have enough law enforcement out there on the roadways, or we need to strengthen the law to make it worthwhile to, pull these people over and give them that primary. It is a primary offense now, but if the fine is not something that we can spend time on because we're going from wreck to wreck to wreck, as most of the members of our highway patrol are, I don't know. We certainly need to look at this because seatbelt usage seems to be dropping in our state. And the next slide is going to give us again statewide says 858. We're up to 876 right now. Again, Orangeburg's up 1. But when we put these figures on here, 858, you can see Orangeburg, Dorchester, Calhoun. So 6.4% of the fatalities in our state year to date are in these 3 counties. So. Not necessarily any agency's fault or any discipline's fault. It's just we know people are out there and they're driving at high speeds. They're not slowing down out there today when it's raining. They're screaming down the road, and they lose control far too easily, and then we have all kinds of problems. So it's just one of those things we're having to deal with. So next slide tells us that we're getting ready to listen to Kevin Smith, Field Project Manager with Parsons. And Kevin has a very interesting, informative, and beneficial for all of us presentation on public safety distracted driving. So Kevin, I'll hand the microphone over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. We'll go ahead, before we start, my name is Kevin Smith. I'm retired law enforcement. I put 29 years in with a Metropolitan Atlanta Police Department. I retired out as a lieutenant, as a watch commander, and an assistant team commander on SWAT. I also spent over half of my career in the traffic unit, riding motorcycles, working fatality crashes, and doing traffic incident management. I've been with Parsons about 3 years now, and I'm pretty passionate about traffic incident management because it's all about responder safety. It's focused on not only trying to get the roads open, but keeping the responders safe. Next slide, please. Distracted driving. This is something that we see every day out on the road, whether it's motorists talking on the cell phone, putting on makeup, shaving, taking notes or writing or texting or eating. All of these things take a motorist's attention away from driving their car. And even though we see this every day in the citizen's car, do we see this in our own car? Next slide, please. Is this a common occurrence in your patrol vehicle? Now, the fire service and EMS service typically ride 2 or more in a vehicle and can allow the right seater to operate the computer, work the radio, and that type of thing, while the driver focuses solely on driving the vehicle and arriving safely. Law enforcement nationwide typically rides 1 up in a car and has to do all that themselves. So anytime we're driving down the road, anything that takes our attention away from the road is not a good thing. Next slide. While public safety officers or first responders may be legally exempt from the hands-free driving laws and distracted driving laws, we're not immune from the physiology of it or the physics of it. It's estimated that more than 30% of public safety crashes involve distracted driving. And NHTSA estimates that 94% of crashes nationwide involve distracted driving of one type or another. For public safety, the laptop and the phone are the primary offenders. The laptop has currently become the primary method of information delivery for all public safety agencies. I can remember when I was still working, if an officer had asked to repeat a lookout, the response from dispatch was, "It's in the call. Look on your computer." Well, that's fine if you've got the time, but many times you don't have the time while you're operating the vehicle. Next slide, please. You can see here that drivers on your cell phone only see a fraction of their driving environment. The eyes pick up all this visual stimuli and transport it to them and send it through nerve impulses to the brain. And on the left-hand side, you can see the driver, what they see out of the front windshield. The eyes pick up all that stimuli and transport it to the brain, but the brain can only process so much information at a time. So that's what they can see. On the right-hand side, you have a distracted driver who's looking at other things, and they only see about 40% of what the distracted driver, the non-distracted driver sees. A big part of this is the physiological makeup of humans. In humans, audible signals take precedence over visual signals. So if you're talking, that audible signal of talking to someone in the car or talking on the cell phone takes away from how much visual information you can process at that time. I think it goes back to prehistoric days when it was more important for that caveman to hear that saber-toothed tiger than see it. By the time he saw the tiger, it was probably too late. And this is true for handheld and hands-free use. When cell phone use first became prevalent, the National Insurance Institute and NHTSA and Federal Highway were doing studies, and they would test drivers with hands-free and handheld devices to see what kind of difference there was in the amount of distraction on that driver. After about 10 years of studies, and the data all showed the same thing, there was almost no statistical difference between hands-free and handheld. There was a little bit, but it was less than one standard of deviation for anybody who knows anything about statistics. It was so small that all the agencies no longer test both handheld and hands-free. They let the test subject do whatever they want. So even though you have a hands-free law in your state, it doesn't make you a safer driver when you're talking on the phone or trying to multitask. The next slide that we're going to see is going to show a bicyclist who had a helmet cam mounted, and they pull up and they stop for about 10 seconds at a stop sign before being struck by a police car. We'll go ahead and watch the video.
You mother! What the fuck are you looking at your phone, officer?
The officer was driving down the road. The bicyclist had been sitting there for a good 10 seconds by the time he made it to the intersection to make his turn, but wasn't paying attention and was looking at his phone and turned right into the bicyclist. Fortunately, the bicyclist wasn't hurt bad. He had some bumps and scrapes and injuries, but he wasn't seriously hurt. This is an example. You know, no officer or no public safety person got up in the morning and said, "I'm going to try to hurt somebody today." We all got into whatever branch of public safety we got into to help people. So we need to be careful. The next video we're going to see in just a minute is a tragic story of two girls who were killed by a public safety officer by distracted driving. We'll go ahead and watch the video and talk about it afterwards. Next slide, please.
He's constantly warned us about the dangers of distracted driving. They can even give you a ticket if you're texting behind the wheel.
But a 41 Action News investigation found some officers are not taking their own advice. Investigator Ryan Cass shows the consequences of what happens when an officer's attention wanders from the road.
This photo was taken the day sisters Jessica and Kelly Ewell lost their lives.
You never know in life that that would be your last moment. And I really hope that they didn't know.
It was the day after Thanksgiving in 2007. Kim Schlau remembers seeing the coroner walk up to her house.
I didn't want to open the door because if I opened that door, it became real. And until I opened that door, I still had 3 daughters.
Jessica and Kelly died in a horrific head-on collision with an Illinois state trooper.
He literally drove through the top of their car.
The trooper was responding to a car crash in the St. Louis area. Court records show he was driving 126 miles per hour, talking to his girlfriend on a cell phone, and emailing for directions on his computer when he lost control of the car.
On so many levels, this crash was preventable.
An extreme and tragic example. We found video of other crashes that never made headlines. Watch as this Missouri state trooper driving 60 while looking at his computer drifts off the road and then loses control. 41 Action News investigators looked through 40 crash reports in Missouri, all with a common cause: distracted driving by law enforcement.
I said, watch out. And that's when he hit.
Bob Dyer was driving on this Independence Road last August when he slowed down to take a right-hand turn. Police officer driving behind him never even hit the brakes. Bob's head smashed the back window of his truck.
He says, I'm so sorry. He says, I was looking at my computer.
We read similar stories all over the state. Officers getting into wrecks because of distraction.
And just listen to the close call a sheriff's deputy had last year. He was on the phone and approaching a railroad crossing in rural Johnson County, Missouri. He says he didn't see or hear the train coming until the very last second when he slammed on the brakes. Train collided with the bumper on the deputy's car and actually spun it around so it was parallel with the train tracks. That deputy just a couple feet away from losing his life.
We found distraction is cited as the main cause in an average of 3 police crashes every month.
Yeah, it's very easy to get distracted.
Sergeant Andy Coates, a state patrol veteran of 17 years, admits there's a lot competing for his attention these days.
Black Ford Taurus.
Along with the radio, there are lights and sirens, radar technology, and most of all, the laptop sitting right next to the wheel.
Officers are wrecking squad cars all over the country because they're distracted, because they're focused on something else.
It's such a problem that Keith Wenzel, a longtime sergeant with the Dallas Police Department, now leads a crash course in distracted driving. From fender benders to serious wrecks. His message to officers: you can't divide your focus between computers and the road.
You may get complacent in what you do and realize, well, I can do all these things and still maintain control of my vehicle, when the reality is you can't.
Help.
Unfortunately, that is an example of, as the mother said, that could have been prevented on so many levels. Under no circumstances can I think of a reason why we need to be driving 126 miles an hour on a roadway. I don't care if it's on the interstate. If there's other cars out there, you are operating in a reckless disregard if you're running 126 miles an hour. You're driving so fast, you're going 300 feet every 2.5 seconds or so. And it only takes a second or a half a second of distraction to cause a problem. And at that speed, you'll never be able to recover from it. Next slide, please. That was one of my agency's patrol cars, the driver not paying attention on an interstate, looking at the computer, trying to update something on the computer. When traffic stopped. It took about 2 seconds. They looked away for about 3 seconds, and when they looked back, they had just enough time to say, "Oh, you know what?" before they hit the rear end of that new Cadillac. $100,000 lawsuit later, bought a new car, paid medical bills, made sure that things were taken care of. That's $100,000 my agency could have used on other stuff, but couldn't because we had to pay out that lawsuit. Fortunately, nobody was seriously hurt. But again, it's that few seconds is all it takes. Next slide. Suggestions to prevent a crash. At the end of the day, the easiest thing to do is to use the radio. Make sure dispatch understands that you're not trying to tie up the radio frequency so that emergency traffic can't get through. But if you're in the middle of a call, if you're in the middle and you need that lookout, or if you need that address because you're right on top of this call and it's a hot call, use the radio. It's so much safer than trying to read the laptop or pick up information off of a laptop screen that's vibrating in your car while you're driving down the road than it is to just pay attention to what you're doing. There is technology out there that will either lock the computer so that you can still see the screen, but you can't manipulate it, or that it will blank the screen totally if the vehicle is GPS based and if the vehicle is moving more than a certain mile an hour. It can do that so that you're not tempted to use that laptop. At the end of the day, if you have to use the laptop for something, pull over to the side of the road. There's no reason to try to manipulate screens and do things on a laptop while you're driving a car. It's not safe. We're not supermen. We're just like the citizens that we patrol. We have a little bit more training and maybe a little bit better experience, but we're just like the regular citizens that are out there driving on the road every day, that we have laws against them doing the same thing. Next slide, please. There are two big public safety things going on right now. The second one's going to be in December, the 16th through the January 1st. Will be a nationwide drive sober or get pulled over enforcement mobilization. Be done nationwide. You can get information on that at NHTSA.gov or at trafficsafetymarketing.gov. The traffic safety marketing is run kind of for the government. It's a great place to go get information on national mobilizations and national public safety stuff. The other one is going on this week, which is the National Traffic Incident Responder Awareness Week. And if you're not familiar with the NITRAW, it's all about responder safety, and it's all about move over laws and trying to keep responders safe on the road. Please go to Traffic Safety Marketing National Traffic Incident Responder Awareness Week, or NHTSA, and look that up. Hopefully your agency will participate in some of that stuff. If not this year, maybe next year. It's really a good program to try to bring awareness to public safety responders' safety while out on the roadway. Next slide. If you have any questions or comments, you can post those into the chat feature in the WebEx. If not, you can reach out to Jeff Allen. He's going to give you his email at the end of this presentation. If he doesn't know it and I don't know it, we'll find someone who does know the right answer and get you the right information. But hopefully this presentation is giving you all something to think about. And hopefully we can reduce the number of injuries and fatalities that public safety and first responders have every year. Jeff, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All right. Thank you, sir. I mean, that was important information, and really glad that you're sharing that with everybody, because I can't say that I'm not, or I haven't been guilty of that occasionally myself. So we need to make sure that we're setting the example as public safety officers out there. So very important. All right, next presentation, we got Jay Cox here with the South Carolina Department of Health Environmental Control, going to talk to us about DHEC hazmat response. So Jay, you have the floor, sir.
Okay, thank you. I am Jay Cox. I am the environmental response coordinator for our region, our area here. It includes Myrtle Beach area, Horry County, Georgetown County, and Williamsburg County. Next slide. And presentation is kind of meant to be an introductory, basic information. Kind of cover just some general information that we do when we get some any kind of spill calls. Next slide. So initial notifications are usually come into our environmental response line, and we manage a 24-hour reporting line for any chemical releases or oil spill incidents and fuel spill incidents. Notifications can be made toll free using 1-888-481-0125. And many times we want that either that emergency manager or a 911 dispatch officer. We'd like to ask to get the contact cell phone number for whoever is on the scene at that moment in time, whether that's fire department personnel or highway patrol or the law enforcement officer or something of that nature, so we can speak to them directly and kind of get some idea on what's going on at the scene. Next slide. So on-scene coordinator, typically when the person, we have several members on a team in our regions. When that person is on call and they receive an incident call, when we arrive on scene, we'll be the regional on-scene coordinator for our DHEC office, and we're typically dispatched once a notification has been made to one of the 888 number, and we'll be heading out to make an initial response and kind of assess what's occurred at the scene. If we determine other sources or more staff may be needed, we would then request that back through to our Columbia office and request any additional resources at that time. Next slide. DHEC responsibilities en route and on the scene. So we're usually trying to make contact with the first responders that are there, and we're trying to determine the size, extent, and nature of the release. We're also trying to inform that incident commander of our expected ETA, and give them general information what we're driving, so they'll know what to look for when we're coming up. And at the same time, while we're trying to go to the scene or something, we'll be trying to coordinate and contact the responsible party to start to facilitate any cleanup of released material and any contaminated areas. Next slide. DHEC responsibilities on scene. We're there to kind of ensure that any environmental releases have been controlled at the source, contained, and then eventually cleaned up appropriately. And some of that's gonna be, the RP's responsibility, the responsible party's responsibility, and some of the control at the source that maybe some of the fire department when they put down some speedy dry or something like that. Next slide. Additional information we'll be gathering, again, with what time did the incident occur, what materials were released, what quantities were released, are there any known hazards of that specific material, any safety data sheets that can give us some further insight into the material, any manifest shipping papers available, is there a responsible party on site, and is there a cleanup contractor en route to the scene as well. Next slide. Again, identify the extent, volume, impacted areas with potential to be impacted, and other areas of concern. So we're asking things like, if there are any storm drains, ditches, rivers, streams, creeks that are close by, or any kind of private property that's going to be impacted. We're going to be looking for a responsible party. Are they on site? If they are on site, we're going to start to gather their information, name, address, phone numbers, information like that. If they're not on site at the time, but we're speaking to them, we're going to start to kind of tell them, you've had a tractor trailer or something that's caused an accident and a release, and kind of give them some details on what's going on at the scene as well. Next slide. So if a responsible party is offsite or we don't know the RP at that moment in time, we'll try to be looking at any driver information, shipping papers that are available. Also using our highway patrol and fire personnel to look at DOT information, license plate information. We also have now some apps that allow us to use some of that truck identifying information where we can try and track down and contact an emergency person with that company. You'll see that Kodo can assist with resources. That's our central office duty officer in Columbia, and we can provide some of that information we gather on scene and relay it to them and have them, while we're on the scene, kind of look that information up for us as well. Next slide. DEC responsibilities for cleanup, ensure the environmental releases are properly disposed of, so correct waste has been taken to the correct type of disposal facility. Hazardous waste goes to a facility that can handle that. Other types of waste may go to a landfill. Oil goes to a proper, oil collector that then deals with that. We then verify any shipping papers or manifests, identify any receptors on scene, again, that creeks, waterways, ponds, soil, wells, water lines, for any potential follow-up testing or further remediation after kind of cleanup has been done. If there is any residual material that's still kind of staying back, we may need to get the contractor in to do a little bit more cleanup. Next slide. DEC is not responsible for kind of calling evacuations. Traffic control, we leave that to the highway patrol. Medical services or advice on medical issues, we leave that with the EMTs. Public safety is usually the fire department or fire marshal, especially if there's issues like power has to be turned off to something or turned back on to something. And then in the cleanup process, if it's on the roadside, the cleanup contractor would need to coordinate with any state or county DOT or other officials for traffic safety. So having a highway patrol officer there to direct traffic or close a lane or something like that. Next slide. Next few slides are some examples of what a first responder may see when they come onto a scene. Tractor trailer was carrying some type of chemicals in barrels, containers. We kind of see they have labels on them. And that is usually where we may get a call about it because they need some further information on how to kind of handle or how this chemical can be handled. If there are any air hazards or any fire hazards, or can it be sprayed with water or can it not be sprayed with water? So a lot of times the fire department will call us to say, here's what we've arrived on scene, and this is the kind of material we're finding, and we need to kind of know how it needs to be handled or dealt with. Next slide. Fuel releases is probably one of the more frequent things that we see. And again, it's where it impacts. Is it impacting pavement, highways, just the central median that's either paved like in the picture, or if it's just a soil medium. And what kind of fuel it is, and where it's being released from the vehicle. Next slide. And so that's typically what we see: a punctured saddle tank on a truck, and we will have usually pavement impacts, possibly side of the road soil impacts, and so we're going to be addressing those. Next slide. So a lot of times once the vehicle, we have to kind of wait till the vehicle is removed sometimes to determine the whole extent of what's been impacted. And as we can see, we've got some pavement, impacted, and side of the roads impacted with some soil. And we'll start to kind of assess that and get an idea from that contractor, if he's there, what their plan is to effectively, clean and remove any release that's been that has occurred. Next slide. So fuel on the road can usually be handled with, some sand, dirt, oil dry, usually is what we typically see. And then that can usually be gathered up fairly easily and either put into usually very sturdy plastic bags or drum containers and then plan for removal. Next slide. So sometimes the fuel gets over into the side of the road or into a small swale or ditch. And we have, if there's been a large amount released, you may have residuals or a pretty good bit that's standing in a ditch or something. We will, a lot of times there will be a vac truck that can come in and kind of vacuum that free product up and can be removed that way. And then they'll look at excavating some of that soil and having it replaced with some new soil. Next slide. So some issues related to cleanup. We have a pretty good DOT that a lot of times will have sand available. If there's been a release that's happened in the highway, they come and put some sand down. And they've been real good about that. They use that. That's not something they will clean up, so that the third party or the cleanup contractor will usually have to clean that up. And sometimes all of the fuel can't be removed from pavement that has been released on, and we may have to, through natural attenuation, which is like evaporation, will handle some gasoline pretty good. And we'll try to use, multiple applications of some oil dryer or something like that. To try and get up as much as we can on that. Next slide. So RP, responsible party responsibilities. So they are required to make notifications, any offsite notifications that are required under state and federal regulations. So that will be like National Response Center, U.S. Coast Guard if there's some kind of water impact, county officials if it impacts some kind of county infrastructure. Spill containment, contain the release in a timely and diligent manner. Any cleanup and removal of waste is typically performed by the third-party contractor. Disposal is handled by them. And then disposal information or manifest ticket receipts, if it goes to a landfill or other type facility, that is usually sent back to me if I'm the person that's on call and I work that incident. Your regional on-scene coordinator is going to be the one that typically corresponds with that contractor on any kind of information that needs to be provided back to DHEC. Next slide. And so our main line, if you have any kind of just general questions, 803-898-3432. And again, our 24-hour line, if an oil and chemical spill needs to be reported, is 1-888-481-0125. And our hope is that this can be presented by some of the local ERT persons in our regions when we can get back to kind of some face-to-face meetings. And we look forward to that at some time and appreciate the time. Thanks.
Thanks, Jay. Good information, certainly stuff that any of us responding to hazmat incidents need to know. I know in my 23 years in the fire service and 15 years as a law enforcement officer, I mean, I've been on enough hazmat incidents where it was good to know the guys I was working with and have an understanding of what we could do, we couldn't do, what you guys could do to help us, expedite the scene if it could be expedited. Some cases, of course, these are lengthy scenes that take a long time to get cleared up. So really good information. Really appreciate your participation in this. You see the slide here. You can follow us on facebook.com/SCTIM Network or twitter.com/SCTIM Network. In the bottom right there, you see sctimnetwork.com. That is our website. It will show a calendar and any training classes, Sharp 2 training classes, or any TIM team meetings that we schedule will be on that calendar for everybody's reference down the road. Contact information here. Ray Parker is my partner in crime over at SCDOT. He is the Traffic Incident Management Coordinator for South Carolina. You can see his email and his phone number. And then my information below that, my email, my phone number, Please feel free to reach out to me at any point in time if you've got questions about something you've heard today, or you need further or additional information, or you'd like to schedule a Shark 2 training session. Just let me know. Again, phone number, email down on the bottom of the list. So that's the Orangeburg online TIM team meeting for fall of 2020. Thank you for listening in and watching the presentations. And the most important thing I can say in closing is stay safe. Bye for now.